OG Rose, and today I wanted to talk about the Rosy Cross Conference at Philosophy Portal, which was inspired and following a course on Hegel's Elements of Philosophy of Right. It was a glorious conference and a fantastic class. I think is at the heart of some of the toughest issues and most important issues that we need to think today. Cadell framed in one of his presentations, he gave a few opening presentation on the idea that part of our challenge today is dealing with the tension of capital mobility, the movement of capital, the flow of capital, and Gieson's mobility. The movement of desire, and you have this kind of Gieson's capital mobility that almost form a kind of new slavery because we don't know how to integrate ourselves with these forces that can give us what we want seem quicker than our ability to learn how to handle desire and drive. And all of this is occurring as we're trying to, fight Gieson's mobility, a J word from Lacan. Then there's capital mobility that's going on at the same time. And Studebaker writes on that very, very well. And so what is to be done? How are we to think today? And there's a lot of people who are working on the meaning crisis, nihilism, new possible metaphysics based on relations that can help us escape some bad forms of nihilism. But if ultimately we don't deal with Gieson's mobility and capital mobility in the realm of political economy, we might come up short. We might, even if we do come to realize meaning, perhaps that meaning will just torture us because it's something we can't realize or ever rise to its occasion. Which brings to mind Dmitri speaking on freedom and what freedom is and how freedom is so important in Hegel and this kind of emphasis of freedom. But there is something about Hegel's freedom that is different than a spurious just, doing whatever you want and following whatever you want. There is a reconciling yourself to your determinations and seeing them as actually necessary for your freedom. I think that he had that tremendous talk with Dylan, Sean, on reconciling yourself with the future. And I think learning to not rebel against your determinations, the world you're thrown against, but reconciling yourself with it and having a faithful presence toward perhaps the spirit unfolding through you and in you, that one can find freedom. And this may sound passive, but I would argue it's some of the most hardest work in the world to come to terms with one's determinations and see them as necessary for your freedom. That doesn't mean you do nothing. This isn't a quietism because you have to work on yourself as a subject. And in so working, if you simultaneously put yourself in the place of interacting with others and identify with others and put yourself in the place where you can be involved in capital mobility and political power, not because you think you can save the world, but because you're in a place for you to be surprised by what it can unfold at you so that you can show that you're prepared for that surprise and thus perhaps have influence. I think this is incredibly important work, and we talk about things like faithful presence of Hunter in Belonging Again, and I think this notion that Dmitri highlights in his presentation found in Hegel on freedom is really important. And then Eliot and Charles and Max, all of them were speaking also about how we need to think spirit politically today. They gave wonderful presentations. Max emphasized some of the critiques of liberalism today, the shortcomings of neoliberalism, that make an opening for a desire to return, say, to the family, because we find freedom from the determinations of family may just leave us empty. And yet, lots of the entire political project of the Washington Consensus has been the freedom of the individual. Well, that notion of freedom is not necessarily the same as what Hegel stresses and that Dmitri was really emphasizing. And I think all of that would have significant political economy ramifications that come up in Marx, as Hegel talked about. And that also is interesting with Eliot on this idea that many things that are wrong today could be unfolded through history into rightness. And Eliot gave some very interesting on pre-Socratic thought, like Parmenides and Heraclitus and others on that I thought was quite interesting. And I like also how wisdom was bringing attention to the section on the philosophy of wrong. We talk a lot about the philosophy of right, but I find the sections on the philosophy of wrong really interesting in Hegel because there's kind of a question of how do we be wrong? What does it mean to be wrong? Like, can someone be wrong if they intend to be wrong? That seems quite odd. And I think that also helps us understand why history plays such a big role in Hegel's philosophy because Hegel suggests that history has we don't know what's wrong from what's right today. That's really not the problem, because that's just, true or false. The issue is what we think is right that's actually not, which brings to mind that book on being wrong by Catherine Schultz that I really like. And so we have to be surprised by encountering what we thought was wrong. But then that encounter with something wrong is part of the choice of presenting us with the options of how to be right. So I think the philosophy of wrong section is quite important, and Wisdom always does great presentations. I suggest his work, and he's a tremendous artist. I appreciated also when Bram was talking about God from a machine, and all the idea that AI is going to change everything, and really kind of emphasizing the perhaps anticlimactic. We're acting like AI is going to be a deus ex machina, but it won't. And the way he went about that and talked about media was fascinating. So I really appreciated that work. David and Benjamin both gave great presentations. McCarricker at Theory Underground. I really like this idea of getting your energy time from deadline and limitation. I think there's something very important about that, and I think there's something with Hegel. If freedom is found in reconciling with determination, that's reconciling with limit, and there's a certain energy time that can come from that to deal with the issue of time-energy lack. And so I think that was very fitting for Hegel's notion of freedom that is so important to the philosophy of right. And I think it actually is really important to create limits for yourself to get energy time. I think it creates a focus, and you make time that's not there. That was a great presentation. I think there's actually, I think that's getting at one of the secrets, if you will, to making time that isn't there, that isn't always talked about. So that was wonderful. And Studebaker talking about the vulture was tremendous. I really liked how he described a good perch and the need of the philosopher today, have a good perch and to wait for the hydra to die and to jump in where there's an opportunity, that the sun does your work for you. I think that image of the vulture really aligns well with reconciling yourself with determination, finding freedom in your perch. But again, finding freedom in your determination is indeed a perch. It's not a isolationist project. It is a perch, and then you're doing the work to be prepared when the time arises. So I thought that imagery went very well with the entire with some of the themes of the conference. Joris, Jason, Quinn, Kali, all wonderful presentations. I like the conversation Joris and Cadell had on commons and cooperatives and some of the challenges of it. And I think it's also just so true that these ideas of, we're going to all get together and be happy and form a community and we're going to do everything right, that's actually just when you find out you're not as nice as you thought. I think that conversation was extremely good and brings to mind the work of Michelle Bowens that I adore. Jason always gives wonderful presentations. I love what he was talking about on the human perfection of freedom, and that indeed there is something about going through the real in negativity for the perfection of freedom. And it really is found in this encountering what you're not expecting and if you're prepared for it or not. I think also Quinn on the politics of subtraction from crisis to contradiction. Yeah, we need a politics that thinks contradiction. That makes me think of the tragic sociology I like to emphasize, a trade-off politics. And if we don't think that, we're in huge trouble. And I think that ties in with Alex Ebert's presentation on meta-political power. I had a wonderful talk with him about that, and how I think also he's right that if there's physics that one can base that meta-political vision in, it gives it greater justification. But I really, really enjoyed that talk I had with Ebert. Cleo gave a wonderful presentation, Darkness Visible, Hegel, Slavery, and Afro-Pessimism. She's an incredible scholar, and the thinkers that she tied together with Hegel to bring in the famous master-slave dialectic and its relevance for the unfolding of history is really, really important. She gave a tremendous image on reason and understanding, where she was saying a way to think about reason is kind of the threads that are tied together, how understanding ties reality together into various threads and ideas, and reason has a way of seeing the threads separately even as they're held together. And so in the imagery that she used to describe the relationship between understanding and reason in Hegel, I think was very, very beautiful and a wonderful image. So I really appreciated her presentation. Daniel Tutt gave a lovely presentation on thinking Lukács, thinking Hegel's politics. I like Lukács quite a lot, and I think that emphasis on the proletariat then kind of coming, there's a change in the mode of consciousness where they don't identify themselves as the proletariat as well. I think Lukács was quite astute in that realization for where the Marxist project and effort had to lead. I think he was insightful on that. And I think Cadell framed a lot of what we have to do today well with the question of exit and love, Nick Land, or thinking Hegel, exit and love. And I do think a lot of our challenge today comes down to those choices, exit and love. And I think Cadell's presentation at the end was really, really good. So I highly suggest the conference. You can find it on Philosophy Portal. On Cadell's website. You can find all the presentations there. For more, please visit Philosophy Portal, and also you should jump on the Christian Atheist course that is going on. It's been extraordinary, and I think it is the conversation that needs to be had today. And I am forever indebted to the work Cadell has done to make these spaces possible. And